Good evening, John.
Hi.
I just want to tell you I love you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll take that anytime. Thank you.
In regards to particular redemption, or some would call it limited atonement,
Sure.
I love your teaching on that the last year and a half or so. I appreciate it. In 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 1, it says, "But false prophets also arose among the people, just as there will also be false teachers among you, who will secretly introduce destructive heresies, even denying the master who bought them, bringing swift destruction upon themselves." Can you tell me how that verse reconciles with the doctrine of particular redemption and, the fact that Christ didn't die for people who will never be saved?
Well, apart from the rather extensive note in the study Bible, there is a very extensive note there on that because it's a very important issue. And I think, what I've said here, and I will read it because I think it's important, the terms which Peter used here are more analogical than theological, speaking of a human master over a household. The master bought slaves, and the slaves owned the master allegiance as their sovereign. Where God in Deuteronomy is said to have bought Israel, though they rejected him. Doctrinally, this analogy can be viewed as responsibility for submission to God, which the false teachers had refused. We're not talking about bought in a redemptive sense. We're not talking about bought in a ransom sense. We're not talking about bought in a salvific sense. We're talking about being bought analogically. And in this sense, every human being that comes into the world has an obligation to God. And as I see it, that's the best way to understand that. If you take, what he's asking, of course, is if you take a limited atonement view, that is that Christ actually provided a real atonement for all those who would believe and for no one else, then you cannot say about an apostate that the Lord bought them. So that's the question. But here it does say that, and I feel the best response to that is that this is analogical. That is to say, every human being has an obligation to God as sovereign master. And to fail to fulfill that obligation, look at the human responsibility side, brings about swift destruction. It clearly says they deny the master. They deny the master. And that's where you draw the analogy part of it. They are guilty of rejecting their responsibility to the sovereign who is over all men. And consequently, they exist in a position of disobedience and rebellion for which they are culpable. Okay? Good question.